Manager forces me to get a doctor's note, despite it being illegal to do so. Doctor writes him the most passive-aggressive note, signing me off for 2 weeks instead of 2 days to teach him a lesson. When I was in my early 20s, I worked at a supermarket. I should note that I was a pretty reliable employee. I was never late. In fact, I often got in early, and I rarely called in sick. At the time this happened, I had not called in sick for 9 months, and even then, the manager had sent me home. I had been up all night, swinging between burning hot and freezing cold, so I was obviously feverish, and I had been throwing up at both ends, shall we say. At one point, at about 2 a.m, I was on the toilet with my head in the sink, utterly miserable. I must have passed out because the next thing I knew, I was lifting my head off the sink and it was 7 a.m. I was due to start work at 12 that day, but that obviously wasn't going to happen. So I called up the manager. Let's call the manager Steve. Steve was known for being a real a-hole. He never believed anyone who called in sick except his best bud, usually other managers, never lowly staff, but often called in sick himself. A lot of the time we knew it was because he was hungover and not actually sick. The conversation went as follows. Me: "Hey Steve, sorry, I can't come in. I'm sick." Steve: "With what?" Me: "I don't know. I think it might be the flu. I've been up all night being sick and I have a fever." Steve: "Don't be stupid. If you had the flu, you'd be completely knocked out. I need you in. Come in or you're fired." Me: "I can't. I just told you I can't stop vomiting." I passed out. Steve growling angrily: "Either come in or bring a doctor's note or you're fired. In the UK, you are legally allowed to self-certify for 5 days. This means you can tell your employer you are sick and you do not need a doctor's note. If you're sick for more than 5 days, you then need a note. It is also illegal to demand a doctor's note during the self-certify period." I knew this, but I was terrified. This was during the recession. I couldn't afford to lose my job, so I got myself dressed, almost passed out trying to do so, then trudged to the doctor's, some 25 minutes walk away. I end up sitting in the doctor's office for a little over an hour, which for walk-in was pretty good. I get in to see the doctor, and she is furious at me for coming in. "You're not supposed to come to the doctor's when you have a cold or flu." And of course, I knew I should be able to self-certify. She told me as such, saying I shouldn't be here and should have stayed at home. I then explained what had happened with Steve and how he had threatened to fire me over this, and I couldn't afford to lose my job. I was struggling as it was. My doctor turned her anger towards my manager. She asked if I got sick pay from the company, and I said yes. "He wants a sick note, does he?" The doctor said. "Oh, I'll give him a sick note." Now, my manager just wanted a note confirming I was sick, but instead, my doctor wrote something along the lines of this: "My name has come to the surgery because manager name has insisted she come in spite of the fact that this is illegal and all employees are allowed to self-certify. Due to being forced to make this unnecessary and highly dangerous trip when the patient is ill, has a fever of 39 degrees C and almost passed out in the waiting room, I am signing my name off for 2 full weeks to recover." Had my name been allowed to self-certify, as is the law, they might only have needed a few days, but due to straining themselves, they now require 2 full weeks. They are not to be permitted to work until date 2 weeks later. The doctor said she would have signed me off longer, but this was the longest she could do without requiring further evidence. So basically, instead of just being off for a few days, I was now signed off for a full 2 weeks, and I'd be paid for it. I went to my place of work, at which point one of the duty managers saw me and asked me what the heck I was doing. Go home. I was obviously very unwell. I explained what happened. They agreed to help me downstairs to Steve's office and went with me inside. I handed Steve the note. He looked worried and tried to say, "I wasn't being serious about firing you." Well, gee, when you angrily growled it down the phone, it sure sounded like. The duty manager then declared that they were going to drive me home. It was clear Steve wanted to argue but had the sense to know he shouldn't. The duty manager then drove me home, made sure I was okay, then went back to work where they informed our union rep what happened. Steve had a disciplinary hearing where he was given a severe reprimand and a warning. Steve tried to argue he never said I'd be fired and I was lying and just decided to go to the doctors, but the duty manager said they heard him admit to it when he said to me that he really didn't mean it. I felt better after a few days and enjoyed my 2 weeks off, fully paid, and enjoyed the nice weather we had. Meanwhile, Steve was forced to work overtime because we were short-staffed. So thanks to the doctor, instead of being off for a few days, I ended up getting a nice 2-week paid vacation, and Steve was given a final warning, all because he insisted I get a doctor's note. TLDR, manager demands I get a doctor's note or I'm fired. So the doctor signs me off sick for 2 weeks instead of 2 days to teach him a lesson. Edit: to clarify the whole, you're not supposed to come in when you are ill. I should have been more specific. The rule is you're not supposed to come in when you have a cold or flu. The reason is there's nothing a doctor can really do except recommend you take over-the-counter cold and flu meds. So it is recommended that you do not come in if you have a cold or flu and instead take meds at home or pick some up at the pharmacy instead of risking infecting those waiting in the surgery. Even then, it's not a hardcore rule, more a common courtesy asked to people. If you really want to, you absolutely can. I have a similar tale on a different tangent. In my country, guys are conscripted into military, police, etc. service in our late teens, early 20s. I was conscripted into the military and dropped out of basic training because I developed a back problem. Was then reassigned to a different unit as a store person dealing. Great idea getting a guy with back issues to carry stuff around with radio equipment. I was placed under the care of a non-enlisted person who I shall call Brown. Brown didn't like the cut of my jib because I frequently reminded him that I have an official excuse slip from the military doctors that said, "Excused from carrying heavy loads." Brown always liked to ask if the heavy loads was specific, quantifiable, and after one too many times of me telling him that, he basically forced me to demand that the camp doctor to just write something. I did just that. The next time I saw the doctor, he sighed and just wrote a note that stated, "Excused from heavy loads of more than 5 kilos. Thanks to him, I got to avoid tons of otherwise unpleasant work and also got out of having a second go at basic training again when they sent me back to training school, since even the most basic of your gear beer would weigh more than 5 kilo para. Grocery stores are some of the most disorganized and mismanaged places I have ever worked. One example, our schedule for the upcoming week is usually posted on Tuesdays, sometimes earlier. I had Monday and Tuesday off this week and saw the new schedule for next week was posted early on Sunday. Saw I had Wednesday off. Cool, 3 days off in a row. So I go hang out with some friends out of town, and on Wednesday morning, I get a call saying I need to come in. Apparently without any notification to me, my manager changed my schedule to be different. I'm 3 to 4 hours away from work, and my shift that day was supposed to be around 8 hours. So I explain this and don't show up. The relatively new manager was pissed at me and brought over the general store manager for a write-up when I showed up on Thursday. However, things were quickly calmed once I showed the general manager a picture I took, the unchanged schedule. It was worth noting also that my manager texted my co-worker to write in the change to the schedule, while both me and my co-worker were at work on Sunday with only my dates changing. Co-worker had assumed, rightfully so, the manager had told me, but for some bizarre reason, instead of texting me, the person whose schedule is changing, co-worker was texted instead. Go figure.